So welcome back, everybody, and I hope those breakout sessions were useful. Thank you very much to the breakout session speakers, because of course they had to do that job twice with rapid turnaround at short notice. So I really appreciate their contribution, and I hope it was useful to everybody. We're now at the final part of the program with Claire and Chris. So let me introduce you to Claire. Claire McDonnell and I go back a long way. We've been friends, critical friends, colleagues, collaborators, Lord knows what, conference buddies for more years than we care to remember. And Claire is just another one of these people that I go to when I need some common sense, pragmatic advice. She's just very experienced in dealing with lots of issues associated with student support. So Claire, I'll ask you to share your screen and take the wheel.
Okay, just a little bit of a lag there. Just getting there. Okay now?
Yep, that looks great. Thanks.
Right, okay. I'll just check. I can see the chat. Just give me a minute. Sorry, that took longer than I thought. Okay, so thanks everybody. Michael's done a very nice introduction. Thanks very much. And the first thing I want to do is to just ask if you wouldn't mind accessing Mentimeter. Some of you may be familiar with it. We're going to use it at the very end of the session, hopefully. It might crash and burn. If it doesn't, we'll have a workaround. But just if possible, if you're working on a PC or laptop, if you could open a browser tab for the site www.menti.com, and it'll ask you for a code, which I'll provide later, so don't worry about that. Or if you're working on a device, a tablet or a phone, if you can download the Mentimeter app, and that's the symbol there. Okay, so the code will be provided later on, and if you could just take a little while to do that now, that would be much appreciated. If you decide you don't want to participate this way, that's absolutely no problem, but it'd be great if some people could. So I'll remind you about that at the end as well. I'm just going to move on now. So from the point of view of supporting students, we've heard a lot already from the previous speakers, from Christy and from Catherine and from Eleanor. And I like this image. It's from an Education and Chemistry article from a few years ago, actually written by Michael, as it happens. And this was the accompanying image. And it just emphasizes two of the things we've already been talking about, that the focus on the transition from school to higher education tends to be on the academic. So there's a brain only shown here as one part of the student, that we have the hoop they have to jump through, and that there's this very dangerous gap that they may not be able to transition across properly. And that's what we're focused on. So just to follow up on that aspect of the focus on the academic initially, I like this particular figure because it emphasizes there's a lot more to it. And again, the previous speakers also emphasized this as well. So what I like about this image is that it shows the institutional environment, that we are only one part of that, one of 6 components there. So we need to be in communication with and coordinated with all of these other aspects within our own institution. And then, as we all know, there are other aspects that we don't have control over, that we need to recognize and be aware of. So from the point of view of induction then, there's a lot of work that's been done, and Liz Thomas did a lot of work about 10 years ago, and I think she's a nice definition there about what the expectation would be of what induction will do. So providing clarity about what's expected of students at university, build confidence and motivation, and allow students to integrate into their new environment. And I've highlighted both academically and socially, and I think that's been emphasized by everybody else this morning as well. And the principles that she has identified are that it should be extended, which is something I'm going to talk about, but the other principles would have been built into what we did as well, that it needs to be inclusive, and involve all of the people that should be involved. And that's another thing I'll come back to. All of those components apart from just the academic that I showed earlier, and timetables so that all students can participate. So we would have had a number of sessions available and they were at lunchtime, but we made sure that it was a maximum of 40 minutes within the hour so that students did have a little bit of downtime if they had to go straight back to a lab, which often does happen with science students. And participatory and collaborative, we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. That's an important principle that we've already talked about this morning, that it's not just someone talking at the students, that they get to draw on what they already think and know and discuss things with their peers, and also with some student ambassadors and peer mentors. And integrated into a subject-specific curriculum if possible. We've done that a little bit. We haven't gone all the way with that, but I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. There's some other useful information sources here as well, so you might like to come back to those, and I think Michael will have shared the slides, and you'll be able to have a look at these at your leisure. And quite a number of these are from the UK, as you can see. In fact, they all are. What we would have looked at initially were some examples from within Ireland, and we would have heard a presentation from the University of Limerick about what they were doing. So there's nothing new here really in what we're doing, but as Christy said earlier, the solutions have to be individual to institutions. So there are approaches that are recommended, but you have to tailor it to your own context. And we would have drawn from these two examples within Ireland, as I mentioned. There's also a really nice example of a fully integrated program, and this would be at a course level as opposed to at a full institution level, which are some of the examples I just showed, or in our case, we were working across the College of Sciences and Health. So there's over 20 different courses or programs, depending what you want to call them, there. So this is a really nice example if you're looking at full integration, and I've got the link there. And then something maybe a bit more specific, there's a nice induction activity from Dylan Williams that some people may already be familiar with for problem-based learning in chemistry. Again, the links are there. So just to talk about then what we actually did, how we implemented the extended induction in Technological University Dublin. We were very grateful initially, myself and my colleague from Maths, Cormac Breen, who's shown here. We got some funding to pilot just one session a week with a pretty small group of students, as it turned out. The good thing about this was that we got a little bit of funding, but the really important thing was that we had a deadline that we had to work to. So it was something we'd always been talking about doing, and this meant we had to do it, and we had to do it within a particular timeline. So I suppose what happened there really was that we got to try out a lot of things. We worked out what inputs were useful, and we worked out how to format the sessions. And a lot of what we learned there, we were then able to apply later, but we were doing it on a very small scale at that stage. And then the timing was very fortunate after that, because at a college level, there was a college action plan that wanted to focus on transition to higher education. And it was identified by our head of learning development, Ciara O'Leary, who's shown there, that what we had done with the extended induction on a pilot basis was something that would be good to try to extend. So that's what we then aimed to do. And at that stage, Cormac wasn't able to continue with the work, but Fionnuala Walsh, who's part of our pastoral care complement, came in and helped also. So the organising team were myself, Ciara, and Fionnuala, but there were obviously a lot of other people who were involved as well. And I think really that year, the big issue was trying to scale it up, because we would have had on average about 30 students attending the first time around. It was just something optional, but they did all stick with it. And the next year we were trying to have up to 900 students involved. They obviously didn't all attend, it was optional, but it meant we had to run quite a lot of sessions. We had 9 different groups, which meant that it took 2 weeks to run one particular session on one topic, and that was just too much work for everybody involved. So we learned a lot from trying it that way. The one very useful addition that year was that we had social events. So individual year tutors could apply for some funding for a social event. And the timing of that was usually that it would take place just after those initial sessions had ended. So it was usually the first 5 weeks or the first 4 weeks or so, once we got settled into it. So the next year we just had 5 sessions that worked a lot better. We could get them done within a week. We also improved the interactivity. We went back to the original model where each person who was coming to speak was asked to only talk for 5 minutes maximum, and to build in an additional 5 to 10 minutes where there'd be some discussion and opportunities for students to talk to each other about something and then feedback. And we also asked them to try to include some very short videos within the presentation that they gave. And you'll see a photo later on just where you'll see the layout of the room where the students were all around tables in groups of around 10 to 12. And also the person who was facilitating would be walking among the students with a mic for most of the session. Another important development was that the sessions appeared on the timetable, and even though the students didn't have to go, it did make them think more so that it was something that they were expected to attend. And we used the virtual learning environment as a support. We also had a lot of interaction and support from the first year tutors, and something that they recommended from the point of view of attendance was to link attendance to a low stakes assessment. And that was something that was optional, but it was something that was introduced for quite a lot of our courses, and that, not surprisingly, meant that we had much better engagement and outcomes. So what worked for us then, I've mentioned a bit already, but just to sum up, we had the year tutors very invested in what we were doing, and they were recommending that students should attend, and they tried to attend themselves when they could as well. We would have had our initial orientation session, which is the name that we would give to that first on-site, or what would have been on-site in previous years, session where students get input in a pretty rapid fire round really about what they need to know for the upcoming academic year. And that usually takes about half a day or a day. There were weekly email reminders about the sessions, and we had our own logo designed just to give us our own identity as well. We looked for focus input from professional support staff, and as I mentioned earlier, it was a very different pace to what would have happened at orientation. And it was also more timely. We were conscious of what would be happening within the first 4 to 5 weeks of the semester and when something might be useful for students to hear about. And I mentioned that aspect of opportunities to interact as well. That was very important. We also had other peers there as well from later years. And again, that was something that was mentioned by other speakers earlier today as something that's important to build in, to develop a sense of community and to develop those interactions. We had a supporting Facebook page, which I'll show you a link to later on. We probably should move to Instagram or something like that, but we just haven't managed to do it yet. And that was useful for following up and having links to relevant websites and anything else that cropped up. And we also made sure that we took a photo of each group in the first week and posted that, again, just to build up a sense of community. And I mentioned we had a corresponding module, if you want to call it that, on the virtual learning environment where we had the associated support material and links and videos and the information about the assignment if students were going to take that assignment. We also, so the last 3 points there are the carrots, the incentives. We had a certificate available for attending all sessions, and that proved very popular with students. They all liked getting that certificate, and the way they qualified for that was if they attended all of the sessions. And for quite a few of the years, we used this loyalty card, like for a coffee shop or whatever, where you'd stamp it each week. And that was an opportunity for us to move around among the students and do that. So again, it was building up connections. We also had, this wasn't cheap, but there was some funding there. We had a light lunch for each student, because in recognition that this was over their lunchtime. This is something that we had done the very first year as well, and we had seen that it was an effective incentive. And none of the food went to waste, because we had our pastoral care team involved, and they would reallocate any food that wasn't used to people who needed it. And then the assignment I mentioned as well, that's been in place for the last 2 years now, sorry. And that involves, it's very short, but it's just a reflection on what was useful in the sessions by each student. They have to have attended all of this, or the mark they get is linked to their attendance. So it's 75, reduced by 25% if they only attended 3 of the sessions, and so on and so forth. And they also had to complete a transition survey, which gave them instant feedback on if there were particular aspects of the transition that they seemed to be struggling with, and they could then follow up with. The logistics then, this would be up to an individual institution what they decided to do, but this is what we went with. These are the 4 sessions listed, the topics, and you can see there's one there that focuses on assessment. Bearing in mind what was said earlier, I think we try and have something linked to that at a later stage in the semester as well, after the first set of results from the mid-semester assignment. So that probably should be rerun a little bit later or followed up on a little bit later as well. And we had 5 groups each week, as I mentioned, and there were 922 students invited in total. They didn't all, sorry, this is the picture just showing the person who's presenting, who's just walking among the students. And not all of the students turned up, fortunately, because we would have been a bit overwhelmed. But we have now got a 90 or 61% on average attendance, which we're very pleased with. And you can see it's increased over the years. And we do think introducing assignment has had an impact on that. We've also run some surveys, which again show positive responses. And we were very pleased as well that there were some focus groups that we weren't aware of that were being run by our Campus Life office. We focus on student support. And they came back to us and asked us, can you tell us more about what you're doing in the extended induction? They knew a certain amount about it because they contributed to it, but they wanted to know more because they had gotten the feedback that our students in sciences and health had a better awareness of services and supports available, which is exactly what we wanted to come out of the sessions. This is just taken from the Facebook page, so it's just that message that we would give to students all the way along, that we hope you chatted to some new people. So we emphasise to them you'll get to meet some new people within your year group if you come to these sessions. Learned more about the supports on the topic of the week and enjoyed the free food. So that's the emphasis. So now on to what we're looking at doing this year in an online environment. And this is where I'm hoping to pick the brains of everybody who's here today. So what we found is really valuable and what we want to keep there is the interaction between students. We want to continue to have the involvement of later year students as well, the student ambassadors and peer mentors. We want to continue to have incentives for participation. So as well as the assessment, instead of spending the money on the lunches, we're looking at maybe having vouchers available for each session, and that there'd be some kind of a raffle or a lottery, and that some students would get the vouchers at the end of the session. But we're open to any other ideas that people come up with on that. And we'd like to keep that follow-on social event that can be focused just on an individual course that year tutors can apply for as well. So maybe online table quizzes or whatever year tutors decide they'd like to do. So how are we going to try and do that online? That's the next question, and hopefully you'll help me to answer that. Our ideas so far, we had a meeting in June when everybody was very tired from what had happened in the current academic year that's just finished. And we made some decisions, but we postponed finalising some of those decisions until early September. So we're still going to continue having the support in the VLE. We're thinking that we'll have some videos there in advance and then just focus on the follow-up discussion and activities in the sessions themselves. That's probably the best way to do it, we think. I have a link to some online icebreakers there, and thanks for sharing some links earlier on during, I think it was Christy's session when there was some discussion, further discussion on that. We'll have another look at those as well. We'll probably use some online quizzes within the VLE because that would link to what some of the activities that we would have had in place. Those activities would have been collaborative in that we'd ask students to turn to the people beside them to help to answer the questions, to try it themselves first, but then turn to the person beside them. So again, we're not quite sure how to do that in a virtual environment. We had been using Mentimeter in the sessions as well, which is part of the reason why I want to get to use it in a minute. So we'll continue to do that. There are sometimes some issues with the fact that it's anonymous. It's I suppose it's kind of a virtual brainstorming session is how I think I tend to describe it to people. It can work very well from that perspective, but sometimes some less mature students can take advantage of the fact that it's anonymous, in which case we tend to just move swiftly on to a more focused type of question where there's not as much opportunity for open answers. And we could talk a bit more about that later if people want to. And I have an example of one of those more focused questions as well within Mentimeter in a minute. Breakout rooms, I think we'll have to use, there's no doubt, because we're dealing with quite large groups. The gulp is there because it's hard to, and Michael's dealt with it very well today, but it's hard when you haven't been able to practice it. You obviously need about 150 people to practice it, and that's not something you can do easily. The last two I have questions in front of because it would be introducing something new, and I'm conscious of not having too many tools, as I've mentioned there, but I think they might be tools that we might look at bringing in, an online crossword or Padlet. Some other considerations then, and these have been mentioned earlier as well, there need to be some training on the tools we're going to use, also on online etiquette, and the digital footprint that students will be leaving, and their awareness of that and of professional communication. And I also just want to end on this quote. I think that was something that came up from one of our societies officers, that the technology can only enable and amplify the connections, that it's people who create them. So that's just something we want to keep aware of. And this is just an example of the pre-induction that's already happened. This is just a postcard that our fantastic admissions and public affairs group have already sent out to our students, which I think is a really nice connection to have made initially. So I want to thank Michael for today, for setting it up, and for all of the connections we've already shared that he's mentioned, and all of you. And now I'm just going to try to move to Mentimeter. So the code is 363680. If you're already in there, I'll just give you a minute if you need to try to get to the browser page. So on your PC or laptop, it'll be www.menti.com, or on your electronic device, it's the Mentimeter app. The code is 363680, and hopefully you can answer that question there now. If you're having a difficulty, maybe Michael will let me know, because I've lost the chat, unfortunately. So the question is, what tools or activities would facilitate online engagement and or collaboration in the context of what we're trying to do, or just in general? And if people could put their answers in there, that would be great. I'm going to share the screen with that in a minute. There's a second question, which is just an example of something that we use for the study skills. So I'll just stop sharing this screen now, and then I'll share the Mentimeter in a minute. And thanks, Michael, for putting up the code. So I'm assuming everybody is getting on okay with it, because I'm not seeing anything to show that there's a problem. I'm just going to have a quick look in to see what's there. Great. And now I'm going to share the screen, hopefully.
So Claire, we're able to go to the next question after the first one. Do you want us to progress
Yeah,
to the
that's
second
no problem.
question?
Yeah, the second one is just an example of something that we have done live in the session.
Sure.
So it's just to show you the more closed options if you have some, as I said, less mature participants in your session. You don't want to give them the freedom. It's nice to give the freedom, but as I said, we found there can be issues. So hopefully everybody can see the screen that I'm sharing now.
Yeah, that's coming through nicely.
Great. I think I can. So, and again, I'm sure a lot of people have already used Mentimeter and are familiar with it. But I find it can be very helpful in those types of sessions that we were running, and good for engagement. So if it's okay with you, Michael, we might read through some of the what's here, and people can comment or can contribute as we go along. I'm
sure.
conscious we're in the discussion phase.
Sure.
Now.
Yeah. So we've got about 7 minutes. So whatever. Yeah.
Okay. So and just if anybody wants to say anything.
Sure. Yeah. They can just turn on their mic and as they need. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you keep an eye on the chat, if you don't mind,
Sure.
I'm afraid it's.
Yeah.
I'll just try one more time to see if it'll come up for me. Oh, it has. Great. Brilliant. Okay, I have it. If it doesn't work, try and try again. Isn't that the one rule in technology? So breakout rooms have been mentioned there quite a few times. Facebook rooms, I'm not familiar with, but I'd like to hear more. An online escape room. So I don't know if someone can tell me anything about the Facebook rooms or the inverted commas rooms.
We have a few escape room fans in the audience I know of
Yeah.
anyway, whether they want to share their insights.
Escape rooms as well, yeah. That's really clever. I hadn't come across that at all. I don't know, does anybody want to say anything about those online?
Microsoft, if you have Microsoft Teams, OneNote is quite a powerful way to make an escape room. I've not tried that, I built one last semester using Blackboard. I don't use Blackboard.
Okay.
But things like OneNote, I think there's a few templates available on the Microsoft Education site that could possibly be easily adapted. And they're really good if they involve things like MCQs, because the MCQs can be the code to unlock the next sheet with the next set of puzzles on them.
That's really clever. Great, thanks. And Richard has mentioned Facebook rooms. Is Facebook jumping on the Zoom bandwagon? Well, that means something is working well, doesn't it? And Daniela has mentioned that there's one being set up in the library as well. That's fantastic. Great. And let's see, what else do we have there? A way for students to ask questions or comment anonymously. That's what Mentimeter is. So, and it's live, but you can save it and you can share it later on as well if you want to. So, as I said, there are sometimes downsides to the anonymous aspect, and you can sometimes check it before you release it the way I just did there, which wasn't because I wanted to check what you'd written, it was that I wanted to check it was working. But I don't think it's possible to get rid of something you don't want to be there. It's either all or nothing, unfortunately, with this system. Group wikis, yeah, absolutely. I think it'd be interesting to hear a bit more about wikis. I would have used them a lot in the past, but I think maybe students working within groups that are then working on say Google Documents as a way of working together is superseding that to some extent. And then obviously there are wikis you can set up within a virtual learning environment, but I think they then tend to go to either the Microsoft or the Google version sharing documents or slides or whatever facility that they have to work further. But I don't know if anybody wants to say anything further about the group wikis there. Discussion board, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I think discussion boards can work really well. And Google Forms are mentioned there as well. Group project sessions in breakout rooms, collaborative documents, we've mentioned that as well, yeah.
I've never heard of Google Jamboard. I guess that's some kind of
I stumbled across it the other day, as in I saw that it was up there and I thought that name sounds really interesting, but that's Dave Otway. Do you want to say anything about Jamboard, Dave?
No.
Okay, but it's good.
I've seen it used very well in some teaching sessions, and I personally haven't used it, but I've seen it being used, and it was very engaging.
Great. Okay. Just keeping an eye on time there, Michael. And Xerti, or I probably haven't pronounced that properly. I don't know what that is. Does anybody want to say anything about that? xerte.org.
I think it's a kind of question answer interface, but
a bit like Socrative, or
I'm not sure whether you can kind of choose a journey or something, or it depends on what you answer. I think it's a much more intelligent kind of question answer interface.
Great.
But that's not really explaining it very well.
Possibly chip in there. So Xerti started life at the University of Nottingham, developed by the Rich Media team. It's now become open source. So it's an interactive user interface. You can have different sort of slides, video clips, quiz elements. It's also been designed from the word go to be as accessible as possible. So it's got compatibility with screen readers, captions, all sorts of different features. So it's an interactive tool. You can build it into your VLE and incorporate lots of different elements.
That's brilliant, thanks. And it mentions,
we'll have one more minute, Claire, if you want to.
Yeah, no problem. So it mentions word clouds as well there, which is something I meant to say. You can do in Mentimeter. You can set up the responses so that there are word clouds. So it'll obviously highlight what's the most common word or words. That works really nicely too. I can save what's come in here and I'll share it with you, Michael, and we can share it afterwards, because I don't think I'm going to get to everything. And Google Apps are mentioned there. Emoji Game, I think Christy mentioned that this morning as well. Jamboard is a visual form of collaboration like Pinterest. Okay, and Padlet is something I've used as well. I think it sounds like it's probably quite similar then. Yeah. A lesson on how to behave online in a video call and what's expected of them. Again, I think that's really important, and yeah, that's a really nice idea, a nice context for introducing it. And the same breakout rooms as in a physically present a lab session, as what a lab session will be. That's again a really nice idea. Yeah, nice continuity there. Bongo, yeah, we have in Brightspace. It's a virtual classroom. We've used that. Online table quiz. Okay, I think I'm running out of time, Michael. What I'm just going to do, if you don't mind, is I'm just going to show the next slide as well, just to show you what it looks like. If I can. Sorry, I think I need to come out of it. We're really fast. Sorry. Yeah. So what I really like about this is it changes as people are putting in their votes, and it's really, it can be quite, well, maybe it's just me, it can be quite exciting to watch it. You know, you can see obviously there's a lot to discuss there about how people think they learn best. So but that's something that you would use in a student session. So I'm going to stop sharing now. Thanks very much, Michael. Sorry for running a little bit over time there. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Claire. It was fantastic as always, and thanks for just giving the insight both into what was, I know from past experience, what was a fantastic induction program, and sharing your thoughts on how that might translate into online. So thank you very much, and I will just seamlessly stop recording that one.